Donald Trump has issued a stern warning to Kevin Rudd, Australia's ambassador to the United States. Kevin Rudd has not been the biggest fan of Donald Trump, having slammed him as being destructive to democracy. This, of course, created a bit of an issue should Donald Trump become America's next president, returning to the presidency. Now, here's what Donald Trump had to say about Kevin Rudd in an interview he gave with Nigel Farage.
We've got a Labour government in Australia. The previous ambassador, Joe Hockey, I think was quite a good friend of yours. You got on pretty well with him. Now they've appointed Kevin Rudd, former Labour MP. I mean, he has said the most horrible things. You were a destructive president, a traitor to the West, and he's now Australia's ambassador in Washington.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Would you take a phone call from him?
He won't be there long if that's the case. I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty. I hear he's not the brightest bulb, but I don't know much about him. But if he's at all hostile, he will not be there long.
So the question is Trump in the right or in the wrong? Well, personally, I think Trump is correct here. This is largely because Kevin Rudd is the ambassador to the United States. He needs to have a productive relationship with that country. He's there to represent Australia's interests. Therefore, unless Australia takes an official position against Donald Trump, Kevin Rudd has to keep his personal views like this to himself. Now, granted, Kevin Rudd expressed many of these views before he became ambassador, potentially when he was working at an independent think tank. And it's certainly his right to be able to do so. However, he also must accept that when he says very negative things about a person, then that might hamper his ability to work with that person. And if that person becomes the leader of the United States, one of Australia's closest allies, then it will jeopardize that relationship, especially if he is supposed to be representing Australia. And therefore, if he's going to opine about world leaders, such as Donald Trump was at the time, then there's a cost associated with that. And therefore, it can cost him his ambassadorship, especially since he was a captain's call from Anthony Albanese. Now, to emphasize this, we need to look at exactly what Kevin Rudd said. On Twitter, Kevin Rudd specifically stated that Donald Trump was, quote, the most destructive president in history. He drags America and democracy through the mud. He thrives on fomenting, not healing division. He abuses Christianity, church, and Bible to justify violence, all aided and abetted by Murdoch's Fox News network in America, which feeds this. Kevin Rudd clearly did not mince words about Donald Trump. Now, certainly it was his right to do so. He can certainly opine on myriad things. For example, Paul Keating has opined on China. He is allowed to do so. However, it influences his ability to work productively with Donald Trump going forward, and therefore it influences his ability to carry out the duties of ambassador. Therefore, it influences his viability remaining as ambassador. The cost of going around sledging people is that there might be a career impact if you need to work with the person that you've sledged. Now, to be clear here, Donald Trump is well within his rights to replace Kevin Rudd as ambassador. This is operationalized by his ability to revoke someone's ambassadorial credentials, thereby effectively forcing them out of a job and forcing Australia to replace Kevin Rudd with someone who could work more productively with him. Now, as to Donald Trump's other comments about Kevin Rudd's intelligence or lack thereof, well, that's really for other people to determine. Kevin Rudd certainly has a Doctor of Philosophy from Oxford, but so do many people who don't have great practical skills and who seem to get themselves into trouble. Therefore, I wouldn't necessarily rely on someone having a doctorate as evidence per se that they are especially qualified to opine on myriad things, including, for example, economics or world affairs or things that actually are going to influence Australia's interests. Or put differently, simply having a PhD doesn't make you an expert in everything and doesn't per se make you suited to be an ambassador. And I've noted that some areas of the media have been referring to Kevin Rudd's PhD or Doctor of Philosophy as perhaps a rebuttal to Donald Trump's statements. But to my mind, it does nothing of the sort. Furthermore, to Kevin Rudd's comments that Fox News was propping up Donald Trump and he was enabled by the Murdoch News Corp. Well, that is a talking point that, again, is a little bit disingenuous. Because in the United States, as in Australia, you've got polarized media. For example, you've got Fox News on the one hand, but We've got MSNBC and CNN on the other hand that are running talking points for the Democrat Party. So it is hardly that Fox News is just propping up Donald Trump. There are other alternatives that were campaigning against Donald Trump since the beginning. Similarly, in Australia, you might have the Australian or Sky News that lean conservative. However, conversely, you've got ABC, which is taxpayer funded and definitely leans very left. But you've also got, for example, Fairfax, which is a little bit more moderate but left-leaning. You've got The Guardian, which is extremely left-leaning. And you've got other more small sources such as Crikey and the like, which certainly more than offset the impact of something like Fox News, even though Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull seem to like going around talking about News Corp, as if it is somehow the devil that has cost them their jobs, rather than their own poor, to an extent abysmal, performance. Now, as for who might replace Kevin Rudd, well, given that Anthony Albanese is the current Prime Minister, I wouldn't have high hopes for this. I suspect he'd probably just reward one of his mates, maybe a former union representative or someone that is aligned with his personal worldview, rather than necessarily someone that will represent Australia's interests, which is what the job is. The job isn't propping up Anthony Albanese's talking points. The job isn't promoting Anthony Albanese's worldview. The job is promoting Australia's interests with the United States, which can include pushing along things such as AUKUS, pushing along things such as trade deals, trying to reach a reconcilable position on things such as China, trying to make sure we've got a coherent position on things such as social media, trying to ensure the relationship is productive and beneficial for Australia. The point is that Anthony Albanese shouldn't just be appointing a political apparatchik, he shouldn't be appointing someone like Kevin Rudd, or to an extent, not someone like Julia Gillard. He shouldn't be appointing someone that is going to be so politically vocal. So, to give you an example, Arthur Sinodinos and Joe Hockey, who had been in ambassadorial positions, remained relatively quiet after leaving politics. They made sure to not speak negatively about other world leaders. They made sure to have a productive relationship with whoever was in charge of the United States. They ensured they could represent us effectively. But of course, given Anthony Albanese's political leanings, he will probably just appoint someone who is a political ally, and this might include trying to score some points with the proponents of identity politics, which Anthony Albanese appears to have bought entirely into. But in any case, let me know your thoughts about Donald Trump's opinion of Kevin Rudd, about whether Kevin Rudd is in the right or in the wrong, or about whether Donald Trump is in the right or in the wrong in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear what you think about this situation.